chapter today. Oh, I thought y'all were going to say, go ahead, Pastor, take your time.
No more boys.
I'm not going to be able to do all 58 verses, so I'm going to divide this message up into 3 parts.
I
We'll
want
do part 1
all
today,
the
part 2
boys
next week, part 3
who
the
are
following
born
week.
to
It's 7 points that I have to
who
make, but
are
I'm not going to
born
do all
to
7.
an
I'm going to do 2
Israelite
today.
woman.
It is the story of David
Kill.
and Goliath. 1 Samuel chapter 17 is the
Dang.
story of David and Goliath. How many of you ever heard of the story of David and Goliath? Let me see your hands. If you haven't heard about it, you are a for real heathen, for real backslider. even people who don't go to church have heard of the story of David and Goliath. It is a most profound message. It is a powerful word, and I just want to walk through
all
this
the
for
boys
just
who are
a
born to
moment. I
an
want you
Israelite woman killed.
walk with me for just a few moments, because David does something extraordinary in this chapter. This one chapter, he's done something extraordinary. In the first 3 verses, it basically tells us that the children of Israel and the Philistine army, the 2 armies, are lined up against each other. One of them is standing on one hill, and the other is on the other side on another hill, and in between of them is a valley. And when we get down to verse number 3, let me read verse number 3. It says, verse 3 said, the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side with a valley between them. And the champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. This man was 10 feet tall. He's big. He's a big dude. He is a giant. Oh, I forgot to tell y'all my subject. I'm talking about face. Did I tell y'all facing the giants? Jot that down. Facing the giants. Somebody say facing the giants. Facing the giants. He's 10 feet tall. Verse 5. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. Now I want you to get the picture. This man is so heavily armed. Matter of fact, the armor that's just on his body weighs 126 pounds. He's carrying some weight. He is fully armored down, and he has so many weapons that he has a shield bearer. He got so much stuff, he has to have somebody carry his shield. And here's the deal, verse number 8. Listen to this. Follow me. Are y'all with me? Have I lost you yet? Stick with me. Verse 8.
I want
Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle?
Dad, what?
Am I not a Philistine, and you are the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. If I prevail against him and kill him, then you will be our servants and serve us. That's the challenge. The challenge is the giant Goliath comes out to the battlefield, and he in essence says, y'all send somebody out here to fight me. The 2 of us will fight, and when the smoke clears, whoever wins, whoever loses, that people, that army, that nation will be servants to the other. Verse number 10 says, and the Philistines said, verse 10, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Verse 11, when Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now, I don't know how any words to describe that here is the army of the living God, Israel, fighting the enemy, the Philistines. They're facing each other. They've sent out the Philistines. They've sent out their giant. They've asked them, Israel, to send out a giant, which they haven't. As a matter of fact, verse number 11 says that King Saul and the Israel army were greatly afraid and dismayed. Matter of fact, when you read this story in details, the Israel army is actually over hiding in a ditch. They're so afraid. They're so horrified. And verse number 16 says in this text, the Philistines drew near and presented himself. The Philistine drew
in
near
there?
and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. For 40 days and 40 mornings and 40 evenings, he went up every day, stood out, and challenged Israel to send somebody to come out and fight. Do you get the picture? They're afraid to battle. Israel is over in the ditch hiding. 40 straight days. They come out, send somebody out here to battle, send somebody out here to fight. Nobody wants to come. They're scared. But when we slide down to verse 40, I want to slide down to verse 40. Matter of fact, can I start at verse 39?
No.
No, let me start at verse 40. Verse 40. Because verse 40 talks about David. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Young mysterious young man comes out to the battlefield, takes his staff. He doesn't have all of the armor that Goliath has. He takes his staff, he takes his smooth stones, he takes his shepherd's bag and a pouch with which he had his stones in, his slingshot, and he goes out. And it's verse 41, so the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. So David comes out to the battlefield.
Now, Aaron, I want you
soldiers,
to go out
colonels,
and take that back down near the river.
people with weapons are over hiding in the ditch. And coming out from all of that is David. No weapons, no stripes on his uniform. He comes out to the battlefield.
Wow.
And the scripture says, I love this. Y'all, can y'all walk with me? I'm sorry, y'all see, y'all like, this is a 12 o'clock crowd. I can take my time.
Wow.
So the Philistine, verse 41, came and began drawing near to David, and the man who bore the shield went before him. So his shield bearer and Goliath come out, verse 42. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was a young, ruddy, and good looking. So the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Come out here, I'm going to take care. I'm going to kill you and leave you to be eaten up by the birds and the beasts. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts. The God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day, I love this man's boldness. This day, verse 46, the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Now, let me tell you how awesome what he's saying is. Goliath said to David, when I get through with you, I'm going to leave you for the birds of the air and the beasts of the field.
Want me to go find?
David is so courageous. He said, when I get through with you, I'm going to leave your whole army for the birds of the air to eat.
Back up. Do you want me to go find one of the Israelite women
I love these stories in the Bible. Y'all forgive me for taking my time and reading them because y'all tell me I can take my time.
take care of this baby for you?
All the assembly shall know that the Lord does not save. The Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And so it was. And so it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David that
you can take him.
Ran toward the army to meet the Philistine, and
you can take him. I'll let you have him. He's yours. I'll help you.
The stone sank into his forehead.
When he's older, return him and make.
His face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, and drew it out of its Y'all don't get it. David didn't have a sword, so when he went over and stood over Goliath, he took Goliath's sword out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. And the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, and they fled. Their champion was dead, and they fled. Their champion was dead, and they fled.
I need you, Moses, since I take... Your name will be Moses.
Didn't do, David did.
Your name will be Moses because I took you out from the water.
David rises up and goes